Ujjayi, and welcome to the Wisdom of the Nile show. Welcome to another evening where we share the wisdom of our ancestors. I'm Katasta Fakara, and firstly, let me acknowledge the world of the divine, and let me acknowledge our ancestors, those who went before us and whose shoulders we stand on in this time. It's been an interesting few weeks since our last communication. I guess I'll start with what is all over the newspapers, all over the internet, all over the TV. Yes, the coronavirus, right? I hope you're not being panicked by it, but I do hope you're taking the necessary precautions. You know, this evening's show is about life and death. And one of the things that I think is causing most of the fear is this fear of death. I don't think people are so much about catching the virus. That's one part. But it's the thought of dying that I think most people are really why you see the world in such a state at the moment. And it's interesting because, you know, if 5,000 catch the virus, maybe 500 die. Then what about the other 4,500? Yes, condolences, and none of us want to know anyone, and none of us want it to be us, right? Of those 500. But if we look at the balance of things, 4,500 people survived. Not just that, when they talk about life, because that's the topic of our talk today, life and death. The virus isn't seen as a life because it doesn't replicate in the way that they have given the terminology for, life to replicate. They don't exist the way scientists have said that life should exist. And so they're not seen as life. But that's very interesting because the virus is able to live in a host, select the host it's going to jump to. When it gets into that body, the host, now the human, because they said it's jumped from animal to human, that virus is able to travel through the body and search for the particular cells. And in this case, the coronavirus, it's the lungs. It's the lungs that they have an affinity for. And when those viruses reach the lung tissue, the actual tissue that they want to get to, they are then able to communicate with the human cell in such a way that the cell actually allows it to come in, because it's like a lock and key. If you've got a key for a door and you don't have the key to fit, you can't enter through the door. But the virus is able to use what it has, they call it the spikes on it, to send it into the cell and then make that cell open its door to allow it in. Then the virus wraps itself with a coating of the cell to allow it to have entry into the cell, so that the cell, those immune systems that would fight the virus in the cell, doesn't recognize it. This is something that doesn't have life. And when it goes into that cell, it hijacks the DNA, well, it's the RNA part of the DNA, and then gets that part of the cell to replicate it, because the virus can't replicate itself. Now, for something that isn't alive, it's certainly showing a lot of intelligence. Yes, well, so but give thanks. We have the natural world. And there are herbs and there are nutrition that can be used to assist the body, the body's defense mechanism, the mechanisms which the virus would use to go into the cell. There are plants which can interrupt that mechanism to allow it to fail, so that the virus can't enter into the body. So the natural world already knows how to deal with that from which comes from it, and the virus is part of the natural world. But yes, let's go into our topic for tonight: life and death. In the traditions, we have the creation story, and the creation story that comes from the Temple of Thebes says that in the beginning there was the Nun, what you would know as the waters. Some may look on it as chaos, but it was the primordial waters. And Kefra, the god or the deity that is known as Kefra, rules over the Nun. And from the Nun became the first great god, Ra. And on becoming from the Nun, Ra said his Hekau, or his words of power, which allowed the beginning of creation. And on his becoming, it was dark and it was cold. So Ra created Nu, the light and the warmth. And he saw that there was nothing to stand on. And so he created Geb, or earth, so he could stand on it. And he saw that it was good. Then came from the Nun the second great god, Imen. Some may call him Amen. And Imen saw what Ra had created and saw it was good. But he saw that with Nu and Geb in that close proximity, that life wouldn't exist. That the fire and the earth, them being together, would not be good for life. And so he separated it. And he created Shu and Tefnut, air and water. And he saw that it was good. Then became the third great god, Ta. And when Ta became, he saw Nu, Shu, Tefnut and Geb. And he saw everything there to create life. And so Ta created life. And when he created life, he created the first two couples, Wusa and Aishat, Set and Nepsis.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with Jah, and the Word was Jah. In the beginning Jah created the heaven and the earth. Then created man of his own likeness. Gave unto man wisdom, knowledge, and understanding.
Jah is my help and my strength, so shall I fear. He's a shield upon my right and my left hand, so whom shall I be afraid? Jah is my king, Jah is my light and my salvation, so whom shall I fear? He's my guide throughout this creation, So whom shall I be afraid? Jah is my king. Jah is my guide in my resting and my rising. So whom shall I fear? He's my guide when I step out in the forwarding. So whom shall I be afraid? Jah is my king. Jah is my guide when the Philistines come down upon. So whom shall I fear? He's my guide when my enemies come to devour. So whom shall I be afraid? Jah is my king. Jah is my guide from the pestilence of darkness. So whom shall I fear? He's my guide from the vampire of hell. So whom shall I be afraid? Jah is my king.
And so Jah created life. But if we take the definition of life that we get from the dictionary, it states, and this is, Google the definition of life, and it says, the condition that distinguishes animals and plants from inorganic matter, including the capacity for growth, reproduction, functional activity, and continual change preceding death. This is a definition of life. So the Oxford Dictionary, okay, let's look at this. State of life: the ability to breathe, grow, reproduce, etc., that people, animals and plants have before they die, and that objects do not have life and death. Objects is something like a stone or the mountain. In the definition that humanity currently has of life, those things do not constitute life. But that's not how the ancients saw it. That's not how the temples understand life. The universe or existence is a plenitude. The world is a place that is full, and it does not leave empty space for new things. Each and every one of these entities is composed of intelligences. The school of thieves have enlightened the world by introducing the concept of the creator and self-created God named Atumu. The god Atumu is defined as the simplest intelligence that replicates itself. He represents the smallest scale of the material and non-material universe. He is small to the point that every component of existence is an ensemble of intelligences that are copies of Atumu. An intelligent is the smallest unit of the material and non-material universe. It is designated intelligence because it adopts behavior according to conditions and situation. Thus, oceans, seas, lakes and ponds are all different sized ensembles of drops of water. A single intelligent is not perceivable. Each entity in the universe is formed to express a message and therefore is associated with an ensemble of intelligences. We cannot say whether the intelligence have a desire or a will to form ensembles in order to express many messages, only that they do so. The dynamic principle of life is the principle of a junction and disjunction of ensembles, and it applies to every aspect of our life and our communication with our environment. Words of Nebnaba Lamusa Modern Denibeg from The Rising Firefly, Volume 75.
Jah is my health and my strength, so whom shall I fear? He's a shield upon my right and my left hand, so whom shall I be afraid? Jah is my
Every element in existence, material and non-material, fits a specific form in the universe. In the continuous dialogue among cosmic energies, life is a part of the multiple communication channels for the Earth. Life is not the goal of these energetic expressions. Life is the result of a harmony that these cosmic energies create at any given moment of their becomings. In this context, we should see life as an entity formed by a dialogue of energies which the Earth receives and emits or broadcasts. The cycle of conception, birth, aging and dying is the physical consequence of a harmony that is created among forces that decay, because every channel of these energetic expressions continues towards its own becoming. Life carries within itself what we usually call death. But what we call life is in reality only one of the multiple stages of becoming. If we compare life to an egg, then that egg is only one of the stages of the becoming of a chicken, and the chick itself is but another stage of these stages.
Jah is my keeper.
How do you reconcile the differences? You don't. These two perceptions of life exist here side by side on the planet. Yet most of humanity is under the perception of the first definition that was given, which is the definition of life being something that is not inanimate, like a stone or a virus even, or the mountains. But within the traditions, it is understood that all that is here is life. And we are just a part of that life, material and immaterial. We come from the same matter or non-matter that everything else in the universe is a part of. There is no void in the universe. There is no empty space in the universe. So we have a completely different idea about what life is, and also within the traditions it's understood that within life is death. Wisdom of the Nile.
of the righteous teaches many, but fools die for want of wisdom. The rich man's wealth is in the city. Fixation of the soul is vanity. Destruction of the poor is their poverty. The poor man's wealth is in a holy place. Why do you fight each other?
Wisdom of the Nile. So when you have the perception of our ancestors, you begin to look at life, you begin to approach the universe and life in a different way. You begin to see deeper into the truths of nature when you become one with the nature. And this was what our ancestors sought to do, because they understood that no matter what you accumulate here on earth, it is only an accumulation of things. But that life was much more than the physical aspects. And sometimes it's best to just read the words of our ancestors, read the word of the priests, read the words of those who have studied within the temples, rather than trying to share my own personal knowledge. So I'd like to share a story with you. And this story is from The Rising Firefly, volume 66, The Night Fire. And it's called The Mystery of Life. Through the generations of the last 2 millennia, the values that are exposed to the individual through the social education of the human being have been and continue to be void of the natural and spiritual aspect of existence. The authenticity of the majority of the wisdom of the Kemiu, people of Kemet, of Medita, lies in the depths of the universe and nature. The will to live in perfect harmony with nature is probably the source of nourishment to the elevation of consciousness and skill. Master Lamusa Modern Denibeg, in his book, The Philosophy Podium, said, in that sense, that the reality of human nature is not as mysterious as we would like to believe. We just have to pay attention. At the same time, the modern societies claim they uncover the mystery of everything in the universe. The wisdom and knowledge of the becoming of the planet still resides within itself, nature, as all of its components sustain this vital dialogue. The following story is about the divination, foretelling, and understanding of existence when attention is paid to our natural surroundings. Nature is life, and life is within nature. Listen while we tell the story. Once upon a time, in a distant village, there was a family of modest means, composed of the father and his 3 sons. The father, during the last days of his old age and feeling his death approaching, asked his 3 sons to gather around him, so that he could reveal to them the extent of his property and the portion of the property that each of them would get as an inheritance once he, the father, was no longer in this world. The old man carefully explained his last will and testament in the presence of his 3 heirs by asking the eldest one to ensure that peace, love, and harmony shall reign in the family as always. The old man then divided the inheritance into 3 parts and asked the eldest son to choose one part for himself. The young man, as every young initiate of the tradition and mastering the values and the responsibilities of the eldest son, decided to use his judgment as the eldest brother and asked his 2 young brothers to choose the part of inheritance that they wished to have, and he would have whichever part that would be left after they had made their selections. He did this in order to avoid any misunderstandings or lack of understanding amongst them. This is how the young brothers chose for themselves the good part of the inheritance, the cattle, etc., and the oldest son eventually made do with whatever was left. As time passed, the 2 young brothers who had the greater part of the inheritance lived the high life, allowing themselves to be drawn into bad company and chasing women who desired them because of their money. The oldest son, who lived peacefully, practiced agriculture and raised some livestock with which he coped very well. The two young brothers who lived the high life were surprised to notice that their fortune tended to diminish progressively, while the inheritance of the eldest brother grew steadily as time passed. Not understanding their situation, the two brothers devised a plan to kill their eldest brother and grab all his wealth that was growing ever more abundant. They decided to flatter him, lead him into the bush and kill him in secret. When they arrived in the bush, they informed their eldest brother that they needed to make a sacrifice and that without his help the sacrifice would not work. The eldest brother found no problem in this plan and told them that he was willing to help as long as his presence was necessary for the accomplishment of their sacrifice. The next day, very early in the morning, the three brothers got on the road to the bush. During their journey, they came across an old person who was coming towards them. When the old man came level with them, he said, "I know what you two young brothers have devised, a plot to go and kill your eldest brother. Is that not true?" Surprised by these words, the young brothers looked at each other in amazement and responded together, "That is a mystery." And the old man retorted, That is not a mystery, but that the mystery is still ahead of them." They continued their journey, and along the way they saw a billy goat that was trying to make love to a mountain. They looked at the scene and said again, "This is a mystery." But the goat responded that this was not a mystery, and that the mystery again lay ahead. Further ahead on their way, they saw an antelope with about 10 arrows stuck in his back. Without any worry, the antelope continued to eat grass. A little further ahead, there was another antelope with a single arrow stuck in its back, who was suffering almost to the point of death. "This certainly is a mystery," said the two young brothers. "This is not a mystery. The mystery is still ahead," said the antelope to them. They continued their journey and saw two trees that stood side by side, with a bird perched on one of the trees. When the bird flew over to the second tree, this tree started growing new leaves and became a more luxuriant green with great share, while the other tree became desiccated and lost its leaves. When the bird went back to the first tree, it started to grow well, and vice versa. The young brothers said, "This is a mystery." But the bird told them, "This is not a mystery, because the mystery lies ahead." Further ahead as they walked, they saw two trees standing on opposite sides of the road on which they were walking. When they tried to pass between the two trees came together and prevented them from going forward. When they retreated, the trees separated and went back to their original place on both sides of the road. They tried this maneuver several times with the same result. "Wow, this is certainly a mystery," said the two brothers. "Oh no, this is not a mystery. The mystery lies ahead," replied the trees to them. The three brothers continued on their way, constantly seeking to finally understand that which was hidden behind these mysteries, which was not the original reason for their outing. When they were thirsty, they saw a brook and decided to quench their thirst. All three of them drank, so much that they almost emptied the brook, yet they were still thirsty. As they got up to continue their journey, they saw a hoof print on the ground that was there, left by the hooves of an ox. This hoof print contained water, The three brothers each drank in turn from this tiny reservoir of water until they were no longer thirsty. They then bathed themselves and their clothes. Yes, to their amazement, they noticed that the amount of water remained the same as if it had not been touched. Now, really? This is a mystery, said the brothers. And the hoof print containing water said to them, this is not a mystery, since the house of the mystery is just nearby. The hoof print then showed them the location of the house of the mystery. This house stood alone, right in the middle of the bush. When the brothers arrived at the house of mystery, they saw an old man sitting alone in the courtyard. When the brothers greeted him, the old man asked them, "My dear children, what has brought you here in this bush?" "I have lived here a very long time, and I have never seen a human being in this area." The three brothers told them their misadventure and the various mysteries that they had experienced along the way. And it was because they were seeking to understand that which was hidden behind the mysteries that they had been led to this place. The old man, after listening to them attentively, fell silent for a moment and told them to go and discover the real mystery. "When you decided to go and kill your eldest brother who is here with you without anyone knowing," said the old man to the two younger brothers. "The old man whom you met along the way was in fact an envoy from the Neteru, the gods, or a divine spirit who came to inform you that you can hide everything from the eyes of men, but nothing can be hidden from the Neteru, and this is true of all men. The billy goat that you saw pressed against the mountain in the process of making love to the mountain was a sign to show you that a time will come when men will want to sleep with women who are older than themselves and old enough to be their mothers. I think that this time has already come, and that we live with this type of behavior every day. The antelope that you saw with about 10 arrows stuck in its back that continued to eat grass, and the other antelope that had only one arrow in its back yet was agitated and suffering, was a symbol of a womanizer, a playboy that does not know how to say no. In other words, someone who likes sex too much without distinction, or someone who has a problem with his underpants. If, by misfortune, he came across a young woman of the same bloodline, that would automatically equal a malediction, and perhaps he will be banished from the family and even from the community. That is why there is great suffering, even with only one arrow stuck in the back. The two trees that stood side by side with a bird above the tree that had enough shade and leaves, while the other tree was desiccated, are the sign of a time to come, when men shall live with 2 or more wives. Each of the wives shall live in her own house, and when a husband shall find himself in the home of one of these wives, that wife shall be happy and start having a taste for life. Joy and happiness shall install themselves in that home. However, when the husband shall again leave to go to the home of another wife, let us call this other wife her rival, grief, disappointment, and suffering shall fill the heart of the wife in the house from which the husband just left. This is because the bird represents the husband, and we are not supposed to ignore this situation since it is already with us. The brook that was full of water, and which you drank almost all the water, but which did not satisfy your thirst, this brook told you about fortune and wealth. You could have a great fortune to be very rich. However, if you were unable to manage it as you should, you will end up losing it without understanding the reason for losing it, regardless of the abundance of the wealth. Finally, let us reveal the meaning of the hoof prints of the ox that was full of water, from which you drank until your stomach was full, and washed your clothes and body, and yet water was still in it. This hoof print spoke to you of the same wealth, which is well managed and has value, that is blessed, with which we can provide ourselves and help our brothers and close relatives without noticing that anything was touched or changed. This is why this water was enough, though it seemed small in quantity, because it is full of blessings. Baraka. This is where this story ends. Those who seek shall find, and those who ask for the way shall not go astray. This is the way in which our African ancestors communicated and lived in harmony with nature, which allowed them to interpret the environment in which they lived, understand the nature that was around them, and to foresee things that could happen during our life. This seems to be a mystery for us. This was a reading from The Rising Firefly, and it is from volume 66, and it's called The Mystery of Life by Busa Shenmira. Yes. How many times do we know ones who have great wealth, who seem to have everything, and yet there's a simple man, simple woman who just seems to have little, but they are so blessed. They have so much, and that person who seems to have the biggest car and the biggest house and the most women or the most men and the biggest job, they cast an eye of envy on that person that seems to live so simple, but they are happy. There is a void in their lives. How many people do we know who has great wealth, but they still do not have the blessings of life? Their life is still not filled. And then they go to their grave in despair. And yet the one who is in simplicity lives in simplicity and also goes to the grave. But they welcome. They are not afraid. They understand that death is a part of life.
The lips of the righteous teach teaches many, but fools die for want of wisdom. The rich man's wealth is in the city. Fixation of the soul is vanity. Destruction of the poor is their poverty. The poor man's wealth is in a holy, holy place. Why do you fight each other? Why do you kill your brother? Then your reward will be the cemetery. To build a better nation, clean up job creation, or there will be no future for you and me. Of the righteous, it teaches many, but fools die for want of wisdom. The rich man's wealth is in the city. Fixation of the soul is vanity. Destruction of poor people is poverty. The poor man's wealth is in a holy, holy place.
What's happened? Hmm? What's happened, do you know? Oh. Alright, let me just call him on here. Why are they doing that? Hey Jason, we're just trying to get back the show up. I'm not sure what's happening. But can I just say, are you 001 312 609 9922, yeah? Is it 001 or 011? Meramsu?
Don't have enough credit to make a call. You can either press 2 to send a free call.
the midst of life, there is death. So true. We're back with you, Wisdom of the Nile show. I'm Katasta Fakara.
The lips of the righteous teaches many,
Being the wisdom of the ancestors.
but fools die for want of wisdom. The rich man's wealth is in the city. Fixation of the soul is vanity. Destruction of the poor is their poverty. The poor man's wealth is in a holy, holy place. Why do you fight each other? Why do you kill your brother? Then your reward will be the cemetery.
You're listening to the Wisdom of the Nile show. We're playing Fools Die for Want of Wisdom from our brother Peter Tosh.
Your reward will be in the cemetery. We got to build a better nation. Clean up job creation. Or there will be no future for you and me. The lips of the righteous, it teaches many, but fools die for want of wisdom. The rich man's wealth is in the city. Fixation of the soul is vanity. Destruction of poor people is poverty. The poor man's wealth is in a holy, holy place.
wisdom of the ancestors, life and death. Yes, welcome back to the Wisdom of the Nile show. We are going to share some more music with you and some more wisdom with you. We have to say again, first of all, let's acknowledge Bless Radio, who each week give us this platform for us to share the knowledge of our ancestors. So Duawu, thank you Bless FM for this platform, and you can get Bless FM on www.blessradio. And if you want to call into the show at all, if you want to share your knowledge, then you can share it on 079-444-31366. That's 079-444-31366. Now, depending on where you're calling from, so I think we're 44, aren't we, if you're calling from out. This is if you're calling through WhatsApp. You know what, I'm not going to say what the number is to come into the UK because I'm not sure. I know if you're dialing out, but what it is, I think it's 44. Yeah, London is 44, right? And there's one before that. Yeah, so if you want to communicate with us, please feel free calling on that number. I'm just going to share some Wailing Souls with you.
Give us life to live.
souls. Jaja give us life to live. Yeah. The only thing is we do not see it in the same way that modern civilization see life. We understand that life is life in its fullest context. Wailing souls. Wisdom of the Nile show, wisdom of the ancestors, giving thanks each and every time. Yeah, we give thanks for life, as we said before, But we do not just look upon the physical things in life. We understand that life is not just a physical dimension. We're talking about physical and non-physical. Wisdom of the Nile show, sharing with you wisdom of the ancestors. And we should be having a brother sharing his wisdom with us soon, so we are seeing if we can get him up on the line, because we would like to hear some of his wisdom. So in the meantime, we will continue to share music with you until we can get our brother sharing his wisdom with us on the show. But before we do that, we just want to say that, we give thanks for those who held the traditions. We give thanks for those who did not give up, but ensured that the wisdom that was held by our ancestors would be passed down, so that in this time when there is so much confusion, when there is so many things happening in the world, that we still can hold on to the understanding that our ancestors have. And why is that important? Because when we see through the eyes of our ancestors, we see the truth of life itself.
You seeks of only vanity and no love for humanity shall fade away, fade away. He who chests for only wealth and not for his physical health shall fade away, fade away. Though some believe in diamonds and pearls and feel like they're on top of the world, they shall fade away. Hear what I say? The rich is getting richer every day, and the little that the poor man got, it shall be taken away. Do you hear what I say? Yeah, hear what I say? The man who worships silver and gold shall surely, surely, surely lose his own soul, then fade away. One who's always acting smart and don't carry no love in his heart shall fade away. God is here and there and everywhere, and he knows when you play the game unfair. So people beware, or else you fade away. Hey, beware, or then you fade away. You gotta fade, gotta fade, gotta fade now. The rich is getting richer every day, and the little that the poor man got, it shall be taken away. Do you hear what I say? Hey, hear what I say? One who's always acting smart and forgetting to carry love in his heart shall fade away. God is here and there and everywhere, and his eyes are watching you.
Man called Junior Biles, fade away when you love too much things, Yeah, spirituality as well as physical, because the both are there, right?
He who seeks of only vanity and no love for humanity shall fade away, fade away. He who chests for only wealth and not for his physical health shall fade away, fade away. Though some believe in diamonds and pearls and feel like they're on top of the world, they shall fade away. Hear what I say? The rich is getting richer every day, and the little that the poor man got, it shall be taken away. Do you hear what I say? Yeah, hear what I say? The man who worships silver and gold shall surely, surely, surely lose his own soul, then fade away.
Okay, Ujai. So while we are here now, I think we may have our caller on the line. But that was Junior Biles and Fade Away. Yes, well, we have been here. You know how it is in the struggle. We have to be struggling to keep this show on the road, but we're up for the fight. And I think we have our brother on the line who we've been trying to get a hold of for a little while now. So let me just check. Ujai Meramsu, are you on the line?
Ujai.
Hey, yeah, we did it. We got you. Ujai, my brother, good to have you on the show. Good to have you on the Wisdom of the Nile show with us this evening. Now, as you know, the show tonight, the show is on life and death. And my brother, you can just take whatever time you were going to take. You take that time because, you know, when we have this struggle like this, I always know that there's something powerful about to come, you know. So we know how this thing rolls and we'll roll with the punches, okay? So, Ujai, my brother Meramsu, so welcome to the Wisdom of the Nile show. I know you've been on the show before, but for those who do not know your name and haven't heard you before, could you share with us what your name is, what it means, and then we'll go right into our topic tonight.
Yes, absolutely. First, I do want to say duao, or thank you for having me again on the show. It is a blessing. And my name is Meramsu. The first name is Meramsu. And Mer, meaning the brave man. And then Amsu is the name of one of the deities in our, in our culture. Mm-hmm. So Meramsu together means the brave man of the deity Amsu. And Amsu being a deity of male virility. And then my last name is Wasaka.
Mm-hmm.
It's the combination of two words. The first one is was, which is a type of staff. And if you've seen some of the pictures of deities in our culture, you know, they're holding different types of staffs, and was is one of those staffs, and it symbolizes a few things, including strength and stability. And Sekar is the name of another deity who governs a portion of the world of the dead. So Wasaka together means the staff of Sekar, that deity of the world of the dead, which actually got me, you know, excited when you asked me to speak and had the opportunity to speak about death. So,
well, as you know, the show today has been on life and death, but within the culture, death is a part of life. So, would you share with myself, you know, the initiates who are listening, and those who are not from the initiation, but want to know more, could you share with us your understanding of death and what this all means within the culture?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, first, I have to acknowledge, you know, my ancestors, your ancestors. I have to acknowledge the Makro, Prophet Neb Naba, and all of those, you know, things that made it possible for this show to be able to thrive, and, you know, especially for me to be able to speak on this show. So, you know, I'm gonna do my best to do them and to do this culture, you know, some justice in trying to speak about that. Yeah, you spoke about a lot of things. But one of the things that stuck out to me is, or one of the last things that you were speaking about is the life that is full versus the life that feels unfulfilled. Kind of like the simple life versus the one like the high life. Kind of concluding one of the stories that you were speaking about.
No, go ahead, my brother.
Yeah, I just came back from a trip to West Africa. Going home, I was there for 5 weeks. And most of the time that was spent, you know, in the Earth Center, if you know, you're an initiate, or even if you're not an initiate, you have an opportunity to go home and to really spend time in very traditional areas, meaning that, away from the city, away from the high life. And in some circumstances, it'll be a compound where you're in the bush, and the way that people live there, the way that people grow their own food and get their own water is the same way that people have been doing it for, literally thousands of years. And so saying this to say that in the time that I spent there, I spent time living the simple life and really seeing people live the simple life. And we say that the life is simple because, people are not so attached to materialism, to, cars and clothes. And you'll see people wearing the same clothes every day for several days. But what comes to be important and what comes to be the forefront of one's life is the quality and the integrity, like the human aspects, the genuineness of the human being, the integrity of the person, the discipline that the person has. And so these are the things that, maybe there's someone who is more materialistic would say, like, that's a very, very simple life. But in understanding, in talking about life, we really can't talk about life without talking about death. And because even for for the people in our culture, really life is just a stage in which we're preparing for our death. Like everything that we do here is preparing for that. Everything that we do here is preparing for death, because even we know that no matter who you are, no matter what side of the world that you're on, no matter how famous you are, no matter how much money that you make, even no matter how young that you are, one day everybody is gonna die.
Mm-hmm.
One day. I'm not wishing for this to happen, but who knows? After I get off this show, it could be the end of Meramsa.
We do not wish that to happen.
Just realistically speaking,
Mm-hmm.
that's what
right.
death is.
Mm-hmm.
It's guaranteed for every single human being on the planet.
Uh-huh.
It's guaranteed more so than any other effort that the human being can aspire to in their life. You can have a person who is going through school and they have an affinity for basketball, and then they start playing basketball and they dream about it. They're practicing for 4-6 hours a day, and they get good at it. They get excellent at it, and they get into college to play ball. One day they can get injured, and that'll be the end of their ball career. So even something like that is not guaranteed, no matter how hard we work. But for that person, we can say that death is guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
So, that being the case, it's like, that's why in our culture, if we know that this thing is coming for everybody, why not live a life that respects death, or live a life that prepares for death? So that's why I say, we can't really talk about life without talking about death.
And it's funny because it's the actual opposite here. In the West, you just kind of try not to think about death, even though it's coming. That you just keep it to the back of your mind. You don't have anything to do with it until it happens. So there's no acceptance of that part of life, because as we say in the culture, death is part of life.
Yes, absolutely. Death, death is a part of life. And there's just so many distractions today. whether it be the cell phone, whether it be the TV. I mean, you can find unlimited ways to distract you from the one thing that's guaranteed for every human being. You know, it's backwards. Here, people live for life, but in our culture, we live for death. So, and really, if I'm gonna talk more about death, I have to talk about the origin of death, like the concept of death. You know, where that comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad you told the Kemetic creation story earlier on, because that really leads into the next part of the creation of the Kemetic creation story that explains the concept of death. You know, everything has its history and its origins, and this next story explains where death comes from.
Mm-hmm.
So, taking off after you had explained how Ta had created the first two divine couples, where you have Wisser and Aishat, who are one couple, and then Set and Nebfest, who are another couple. And this is after Ta had, you know, created life in the world and the things that we see today, like the existence that we see today. And so this next part of the story takes place between these two couples. And it's important to note that the characteristics of Wisser and Set, because when Wisser and Set were created, they both had a decision on how they're going to live out their immortality. You know, they're divine beings. They're going to live forever. But not all divine beings live out their immortality in the same way. It's not going to look the same. So Wisser chose to live out his immortality through death and resurrection, meaning that he dies, and then he comes back through his descendants, and then he lives a life, and then he dies, and then he comes back through his descendants, and it's a continuous cycle. Set chose to live out his immortality without dying, just kind of living eternally, meaning that he doesn't die. He just continues to perpetuate himself. He can't be killed. Another thing to note about Set is because of that, there's really no reason for Set to have children. You get what I mean? Like, if he's gonna perpetuate himself, he doesn't die. There's no reason for him to have children or offspring, because the reason that you have children is so that you come back through them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you pass on the things that you have.
Mm-hmm.
But if he's going to be able to keep everything for himself, there's no reason for him to have children. So for that reason, he's sterile. He doesn't have children. And he has more of like an aggressive kind of a conquering type attitude. So with Wisser, keeping in mind that Wisser is coming back through his descendants, and he can come back in many different places. Like if he's gonna die and then resurrect through a certain human being, he's gonna want to come back in a good place and in a good position. It's like if I told you that, you know, you were gonna die next week, and then a few weeks later you're gonna come back. You want to come back in a family that is going to take care of you and value you and will give you a good upbringing,
Mm-hmm.
versus you maybe growing up with a family that doesn't care about you, or, didn't struggle for you or doesn't care about your well-being. Like, you want the best for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And if there was a way to increase your chances of being born into a family that will value you, you're going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So now, for that reason, Whistler makes it his life's work to travel the world educating human beings on different areas of, I mean, really everything that the human being needs for his survival. So learning how to grow food, agriculture, learning how to clean themselves, learning how to live according to the principles of nature, learning the stars, astronomy, all of these different aspects of life. Dedicated his life just to that. So this story takes place while Whistler is on his way back from one of those travels around the world. And he's coming back to what we know today as Egypt, kind of where his home was. And on his way back, his brother, Set, decides that he's going to throw a party for Whistler. Like a welcome back party. He's been out traveling. Now, keeping in mind, I was explaining about Set and kind of the attitude that he has. But also, Whistler and Set, they have equal domain. Like, when they were created, they're told that they have equal domain to the world. Whistler has his portion of the world, Set has his portion of the world. But now Set, being the one that's more aggressive, he's going to want to take more and conquer more for himself. So Set, he's planning a party for Whistler. And before Whistler arrives, Set manages to get Whistler's measurements, like his body measurements. His arms and his legs and bust and, all those things. So he builds a coffin according to the measurements of Whistler. So now at this party, you have Set, and he has different accomplices that he's working with. And so in the midst of the party, Set, he then, kind of gets up and he makes the announcement. Okay, I have this coffin. And the coffin is beautiful. I mean, it's very elaborately made. It's beautiful. And he says to everyone in the crowd, whoever can fit in this coffin, you're going to have it as a gift. And so after that, I mean, each one of the, everyone that's there, they start stepping into the coffin. But of course, some of them are too tall. Some of them are too fat. They don't fit very well. Some of them too short. And eventually, Whistler gets in. And of course, Whistler, the coffin was made according to his measurements. So of course he fits perfectly in the coffin. Immediately, when he gets in, there's a commotion. Like, everyone's celebrating, someone got in the coffin and he fits perfectly and he's gonna get the prize. And in the midst of all that commotion, Set and his accomplices jump on the coffin, they nail it shut, and then they throw it into the Nile River. And from the Nile River, it then flows out into the Mediterranean Sea. Now, earlier in talking about the divine couples, you had also mentioned Aisha, who is Whistler, who is Whistler's wife. Now, when the coffin with Whistler was thrown into the Nile and it's flowing out to sea, Aisha, sensing that something was wrong, she wasn't there, let out a cry. And from that moment, she then set out to find Whistle. So now the coffin washes up on the shores of a city that's called Pan. And it washes up in the roots of a tamarind tree. Like, tamarind, like, tamarind juice, the fruit tamarind. So it washes up in the roots of a tamarind tree. And now, keeping in mind that this is the body of a divine being that's inside of that coffin. Like, it's no ordinary person, or it's no ordinary, it's not a person. So tamarind trees, on average, if you look them up, maybe like 40, 60, 80 feet tall that they'll grow. Now this one, just based off of the energies that Wissa's body is emanating, grew over 100 feet tall. So it's immense, it's enormous. And the coffin then gets intertwined in the roots, and you can't even really see the coffin anymore. So in this city, there's, or really in the kingdom of Pan, there's a king, and one day he's out hunting, with some of his people, and they come across this tree, and they see how humongous it is. And so when the king sees that, he says, you know what? I want this tree to build my palace with. And so they take the tree, they chop it down, and bring it back to the palace. So actually the part of the palace that the king wanted to use the tree for were the different pillars. Pillars holding up like the roof of the palace. But what's amazing is that because of the size of the tree itself, there was enough for 4 pillars, but even on top of that, there was enough wood left over for the roof. And in the midst of all that, still the coffin that had Whistle inside managed to stay intact. They still did not know that there was a coffin there. But that's how much wood that this tree produced. So I shot, again, these are divine beings. So they're going to have capabilities, and they're going to have capabilities that human beings, don't have. And so I shot, in the story, you'll hear different places where she's using her powers and using those capabilities to achieve her goals. So Aisha, using those powers, she happens to locate the coffin, meaning that she knew that it was in the city of Pan, and she knew that it was in the palace, but didn't know exactly where. So what she does is she disguises herself as a very humble woman, a very humble woman. And she goes to the shores of Pan, kind of next to the water. And when the maidens from the palace come to the water to wash their clothes, she offers to braid their hair. And keeping in mind that, again, this is the divine being. It's not the woman that, is doing hair down the street from you, at the braiding shop. Like, this is a divine being. So when she's braiding the hair of these maidens, I mean, it's so perfect and it's so elaborate. You can't help but notice it. You can't help but notice it. Somebody walking past that person, your jaw drops. So when the maidens are going back to the palace, of course, eventually their hair catches the attention of the queen. And so the queen then says, okay, whoever's doing you all's hair, bring her. All the while, they don't know that this is Aisha. They don't know that this is a goddess. And so, Aisha, she's brought to the palace. And the queen ends up making her her personal hairdresser and the babysitter for her newborn baby, because the queen just had a baby. Now, as she's doing this, Aisha, each night, she uses those powers that I was talking about. She uses those powers to morph herself into a bird and circle the palace looking for the coffin, trying to find Wissa, locate him. And in addition to that, she's the babysitter for the newborn baby. So each night while she's watching the baby, she has an ability where she uses fire in order to clean, like to cleanse things. And it's not, so she's using what she'll do each night when she's taking care of the child, when the queen is away, when everyone is away, is she'll hold the child in one hand and then use fire in her other hand to clean the baby with. And it's not burning the child. It's not hurting the child. It's the way that she's using that capability in order to clean whatever, corruptions may be within that child. And so she's doing this each night. And one night, the queen walks in. The queen walks in while Aisha is, doing this to the child. And I mean, what are you going to think? There's someone that's holding fire under your child. So she's going to, have a big reaction. And so, of course, at that point, Aisha has to reveal herself. She has to, let the queen know who she is and the real reason that she's there. And so after the queen hears the story, she lets the king know, and they locate the coffin for her and give her the coffin. So after all of these efforts, Aisha finally has the coffin, to be able to have the body of Wissa. And she wants to use her capabilities in order to revive Wissa, who at this point, he's gone. But she wants to revive him. Because what becomes so vitally important at this point is that I was saying earlier how Set is very aggressive, and he wants as much of the world and as much as of the domain for himself, as much as he can get. So even if that means taking Wissa's portion away from him. Now, the only way that Wissa will be able to come back is if he has children. He has to have a child. If he doesn't have a child, you remember the only way he perpetuates his immortality is he has to die and then resurrect. But he has to have children in order to do that. That means if he doesn't have children, he misses that opportunity and he's no more. Like he's done. So that's why it's so important for him to have children. And Aisha understands this. She knows this. So that's why she's working so diligently just to be able to find the coffin and find some way to be able to revive Wissa. So after she receives the coffin, she takes it to a swamp, and in order to hide it. So she decides to hide it there, and then to go and find her sisters, other deities that will be able to help her to revive Wissa. Now, when she left, Set found his way to the coffin, and he enters the swamp. Even enters the swamp under the disguise of to be boar hunting. He enters the swamp. He finds the coffin. He opens it up, and he takes Wissa's body and he chops it into 14 pieces. Those pieces, he scatters them. In some versions of the story, he scatters them, in the swamp. In some versions, he throws them in the Nile, and those pieces kind of spread across the world. But the important point being that he takes Wissa's body and he scatters it. Remember, he wants everything for himself. He wants to get rid of any opportunity, any chance that Wissa has to be able to come back and to reclaim that domain. So after this, Aishat, she finally comes back to the swamp, only to see that the coffin is empty. Yeah, it's like, how do you react, right? Because all the things that she's been through, all of the trials, the tribulations, didn't get to say, any last words to her husband, didn't get to, see him one last time before, he was killed, and then had to go to the palace and, braiding hair, all of these different things. We don't even know how long she was doing that for. It could have been, a few days. It could have been weeks or years. Who knows? All of those efforts, she finds the coffin, comes back, only to see that the body is gone. And at this point, she lets out what we call in our traditions the second cry. She had that first cry, and then this one is her second. But this one is even greater. It's even more powerful than the first. And in fact, anything that was in the vicinity of this cry, anything that heard it, any animals fainted, even any birds that were flying in the sky, they heard it, they fainted immediately, just fall out of the sky. But again, somehow Aishat finds the strength within herself to be able to, pull up her bootstraps and then go and find those pieces of Wissa. So however long it took her, she uses her powers in order to gather those pieces of Wissa, and there were 14 pieces that Set had cut Wissa up into, but she only found 13. And the 14th piece turns out to be the phallus, or Wissa's penis, his erect penis. Now, isn't that something? Even through all of this, the very piece that they need in order to procreate, in order to achieve that goal, to make sure that Wissa and Aishat have a child so that Wissa will be able to come back, that very piece is no more. It wasn't an arm, it wasn't a leg, it was the one piece that they need. So again, Aishat, using her powers, then is able to create another one for Wissa. And at that point, they then have a child. Now, this is really where even I myself, I really have to stop and think, because if you hear about all of the things, all of the challenges, the adversities that these parents go through, that child had better be grateful for his life, right?
I think so.
For his life. Because who is he to come into life and then to say, this is my life. I don't deserve to take care of, my mother, forget my father. Nothing, came, like everything is mine. Nothing came from them.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. What do I owe them? Like, who would he be to say something like that?
I'm grateful.
Who would he be? So that child's name is Heru. Heru. And uh, shortly after, not too much long after Heru was born, Whistler makes his transition to, like, he dies again. That last ounce of energy that he had, because he was already chopped up into 14 pieces. He was killed, and then it was like, his body was chopped up and then resurrected after that. There's only going to be so much energy that he has. But even with that little amount of energy that he had, the last thing that he decided to do was to have a child. We have to think in life, if we know that we're about to go, if we have an hour or a day, it's like what is the last thing that you would do? Some people might say, like, I would call this person. Some people might say, I would go and eat my favorite cake. Some people might say I'll go and skydive or whatnot. With that last ounce of strength, he decides to have a child. And after that, then Whistler dies, and that's what we would call like the first death. Like, he's the first one to really experience death. And in that realm of death, or the underworld, the world of the dead, there's many names, he becomes the sovereign. He becomes the king of that realm. And that really opens the door now for human beings to be able to, when human beings die in transition, to be able to go and to see him. Which becomes very important for us because, like I was mentioning earlier, Whistler is the one that sacrificed his entire life, his entire being, just to be able to go around the world and to educate to educate human beings. Dedicated everything to that. Didn't have an ambition to become famous, or didn't have an ambition to, buy this thing or do that. It just became a matter of teaching and educating human beings. That's it. So everything that we know, we have to thank him for. It's like you ever have a teacher in school where that particular teacher, they were maybe hard on you, or you really felt that they took your education with value, and they wanted to make sure that you didn't fail, wanted to make sure that you succeeded. And even, 10, 20 years, however old you are now, you look back and you think about that teacher like, man, they really like helped me in my life. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be where I was now. It's kind of, you can kind of think of it like that. So now when the human being dies, we have an opportunity to go and to see him. But it's not even just seeing him and greeting him, but being able to go and to see him and to kind of show him that when I was here in this life, before I died, I lived so well according to the principles that you taught us how to live by. I made sure the things that you told us not to do as human beings when you're here, how to clean ourselves, how to act amongst other human beings, how to not hold things within ourselves, how to express ourselves. I live my life so well according to those ways, to those principles. That moment, that opportunity, That's what kin people live for. So that's why I say that you can't talk about life without talking about death, because it's just preparation for that. And if you've heard, if the listeners are familiar with the 77 commandments, if you've spoken about it before on the show, those are the principles that I'm talking about. So when we are here in our life, we dedicate ourselves to trying our best to follow those principles, because we know that one day we're gonna, meet our ancestral father again. It's so important that we understand that really that when I'm talking about Heru and Heru being born, and he definitely has no space to take his life for granted. That's every single human being. That's every single human being. Because every single human being is only the product of two people that came together, their parents. But even more than their parents, you have every human being is going to have a mother and a father, but then even their mother is going to have a mother and a father. Even that person's father is going to have a mother and a father. And each of those parents and those grandparents and those great-great-grandparents, they have their stories of the struggle. They have the stories of what they went through in order to get the food on the table. They have the stories of what they went through in order to, dodge the trials and tribulations just to make sure that you were born. Healthy, safe. That's every single human being. Each one of us. So this story, that's what makes it so amazing. It's because it's not a story about one group of people in one part of the world. It's a story about humanity, because every single person hearing this can relate to that.
That's right. That's right. You're listening to Bless FM. We have our brother Meram Sue sharing with us the wisdom of the ancestors. Yes, my brother, please continue.
Okay. There was one thing I did want to, let me see. So now when it comes to death for the human being, I had mentioned about, Wizard when he died and going into a realm where no one else had been before. Like we say, he was the first one to die. So even for the way that he died, that same experience, it's a similar experience for the human being too. Like for us, death, it's very clear. Like we know what happens after. So when the human being dies, it's like if you imagine going to you wake up one day and you're in a city or you're in a village, you're in a place where you don't know anybody. You're naked. You have no food. And the people around you, they're speaking, but you notice that you don't speak the same language. So anything that you try to say, communication doesn't happen. Any of the logics that maybe worked for you here in life, those logics don't work in this new place that you're in. So imagine that you're in a place like that. And that's how death is for the human being. Now, what's also important is that there's a connection between those of us here living, and there's a connection between those of us here living and those that are dead, those that have passed away. So if you imagine yourself being in that situation that I was just talking about, and let's say that someone, you know, you never seen before, but they come up to you and they have a box in their hands. And they say, I have this box for you. And, you're going to be confused, like, okay, this guy is speaking my language and he has a box for me. What is this? And he says, oh, yes, this is from your grandson, Billy. So is this from my grandson? He said, yeah. And you open up the box and it has food, maybe it has clothes, has everything that you need, to help you where you are right then and there. So when we talk about doing offerings, that's what that does for those people who have passed away. Those people who are in that realm, you give them offerings. In the Kim culture, we have simple offerings that we do. They're kind of like pancakes that you make, and do those, every 10 days. Those offerings, you give those to that father that passed away, that aunt that passed away, whoever it is that's in your family that you need to feed, you give those to them. That's what that does for them. So that's, part of the connection that we have with those people that have passed away.
So what you're saying is there's an energy exchange happening between this dimension and the next.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And even it is an exchange. It's not, necessarily a one-way thing, meaning that, yes, you give offerings to those people, but even those people will be able to help and assist you in your life. So let's say, for example, you're dealing with, just some challenges with your family, and you're not getting along with a brother, and you've tried for years and years, and things just don't work out between you and this brother, and whoever you make your offering to, that person that's passed away, you express that. Like, I've been trying with this brother of mine and things just aren't working. Like, I need some kind of support. I need your help because I want things to be right. I want things to be right between us and clean between us in our relationship. And then maybe, next day, a couple days later, a week later, you'll start to notice changes. Kind of something opens up where what before would inhibit your communication with that brother, now maybe he's opened up some more. He opened up to you about something, and now a door is open for you to really build that relationship and to become better siblings. So this is the sort of relationship that we have between us and our ancestor. And so, yes, absolutely. When we're talking about life and death, when we're talking about life, we have to talk about death. But then, it's also important to see the cyclical aspect of everything and how everything is tied in, intertwined.
Wow. You're listening to blessradio.org, 0794443136, although we have gone past the time, so if anyone did want to call, we are on the last legs. And we're talking about life and death within the Kemetic tradition, where our ancestors understand it. And, the thing about this is that across the board, even those of us in the West Indies, those even in the Americas, knew that there was some connection, some way that you had to keep that connection, because You know, sometimes you would eat and then you'd take a little bit out of your plate and you'd put it down. And that was always something you would give for your ancestors. You know, we even see the men, even when they drink rum, even the drunkard knows that before he takes a drink, he pours some to the earth for his ancestors. So this is something that's just in us as a people. This concept of sharing with those that went before us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. It's not something that Bless Radio or the Earth Center has tried to make. We're not reinventing any wheel.
Mm-hmm.
This is a very, very old culture. These are very old traditions, and really, I can't help but feel like it's something to be proud of.
Of course,
it's something to be proud of, because even if you think about how, you told a portion of the creation story. I told a portion of the creation story. Compare that to, the person who comes into the world thinking that one day there were a few elements that came together and then a big explosion, and then the universe was created.
Wow.
Like it was an accident.
Wow.
Now, for the person who thinks that, okay, the universe, the world that I see today, the trees, the sun, the cars, all of is a big accident, how are they going to value their life?
Well, we see from their definition of life, how they perceive life, how their perception of life is so narrow.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And then even based off of that, it's not a surprise where people kind of worship what we call YOLO, you only live once life, where you're just trying to maybe have as much fun as you can here, enjoy as much as you can before, one day you black out and you die. Because it was an accident anyway. It's like a child that grows up and then they find out that, oh, you know what? My mom and pops came together and it was an accident. They didn't really want me. It was an accident. How's that child going to feel about their own life?
Mm-hmm.
But now imagine an entire civilization that, is thinking that that's how the world came to be. Well, how are those people going to act?
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to act based off of how you think the world was created.
And I think
now,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's such a profound statement. It might seem so simple, we spoke about the simplicity of things, but, how you perceive your coming into existence actually dictates your behavior within the world.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why I say, like, we have to be so proud, because we have these stories that have been passed down and preserved in our culture. These stories that have given us a model, have shown us how we need to live as human beings. And these same stories, when you have a civilization that lives their life according to these stories, you can see the great things even the physical great things that have been built. There are structures in Egypt that people are still, modern scientists stumped by. They can't figure out.
But I think
how is this thing?
I think even the fact that we are here now in 2020 on a radio show via Bless FM, Bless Radio, Earth Center, and that we are here speaking about knowledge that is coming from thousands of years ago. That is a living testament. You have the physical aspect, but then you have that which has been passed down, which is almost more than words can express.
Hey sis, are you there? You cut out for a second.
Yes, I am here. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Are you there? I can hear you loud and clear when you were speaking. Are you there?
Okay, I hear you now.
Okay, great. Yeah. So I was just, just concurring with you in terms of the great monuments that were built that people can still see with their eyes, but the fact that we still have the temples that is carrying on the knowledge through time, that we can even be sitting here now and discoursing, is huge. It's monumental. That for me is as monumental as the pyramids, because it's the same knowledge, the same wisdom that brought that into existence.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was speaking before about how I just came back from the continent and seeing the simple life that people live. Even when you look at a simple village compound, where maybe you think people are poor because they're having to go so far to get their own water, or they're having to make their own food and sustenance. They hold those same values. They hold those same principles. Those same principles and that same knowledge that made, Egypt the light of the world is still there. It's still alive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We just have the great opportunity, through the Earth Center, through Prophet Nava, to be able to benefit from, to learn it, to relearn it.
Yeah. And I think that is, it's priceless, because, many of us have been to Africa before going to Merita, as we say, and the opportunity to reconnect with the traditions were not as real. You might go and you see some African dancing and drumming, which is brilliant. That's great because it's part of the culture. But to truly begin to connect with the temples, with the traditions, that's, it's another level. It's another level, which, again, I'm really thankful for, that those temples are still there and that we can be a part of that. Yeah. We are now on our way to 11 o'clock, so we have really gone way over time, but it was necessary. Maramsu, is there any message that you would like to leave our listeners with before we have to close off this evening?
Let me see. Well, I'll say that, anything that we do, like keeping in mind the story of the holy drama with Wissa, Set, Aishat, keeping in mind what the decisions that made amongst the challenges that they were going through. We have to live. We have to live a life where we're not living for ourselves. Where we're not living just for the self. We just here for a short moment in time. For a quick, 60, 80, 100 years if you're lucky.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So if you want to leave a legacy, if you want to leave something behind, that has to be through the children.
Yeah.
And it has to be through the children. And so, anything that we do today, like any good that we do today, we're not doing it for today. We're doing it for tomorrow. So with that, I encourage everybody to keep that in mind, but also to keep in mind that we're really in a world today where, like I was saying before, everything is flipped. Because life, instead of death, life has become what's more important. Instead of living for your descendants or thinking about the ancestors, now it's flipped to thinking about the self.
Mm-hmm.
So with a person turning back to their traditions, it's really a fight. And we're in the midst of a fight. We're in the midst of a war.
Mm-hmm.
And it's at the point now where everyone should have that fire burning within them for that revolution, for that change back to a life that is in line with the principles of nature, a life that is in line with something that's going to make your ancestors proud, something that's going to make your children look back and say, you know what, I'm happy that that person was my grandfather or my grandmother.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Dua for your words of wisdom. Miramsu, can you tell us where you're calling from?
I'm calling from the Earth Center in Chicago.
Chicago, just so we know where on the planet that you're calling from. I just realized we didn't get your location earlier. I want to say Dua Isa, thank you very much for calling in to the Wisdom of the Nile show this evening and sharing with us your wisdom, your wise mind, that which was passed down. And we do look forward to having you on the Wisdom of the Nile show with us again in the near future. We ask the divinities and the ancestors keep you, your family, and the rest of the initiates there in Chicago and wherever they may be listening across the planet. We ask the Most High to keep and continue to guide you.
Yes, Netter Dua. Thank you so much, Katasta. I look forward to being on the show again.
Okay, Duao, Irihiru.
Irihiru.
Yes, that was our brother Meramsu calling there from out of Chicago. We have gone way over time this evening, but I think it was so important that we had a chance to look again at these two words that mean everything: life and death. The way our ancestors understand life. You've been listening to the Wisdom of the Nile show. I want to thank you for being here with us this evening. Wishing you the best, asking that the ancestors guide and protect you, and that the divinities continue to walk with you. Dwell Isa, until next time, you will have with you Kasati and Nehipsa next week. So we have someone in the studio here as we log out. Yes, so we who will be sharing with you further wisdom from the Nile. And we say duao to our caller this evening, Meramsu. To all who are listening, continual guidance and protection. Until next time, Irihiru.
The definition of humanity. Maheru, maheru, maheru. From far away, from far away, far away, from far away. Africa, from far away. Prophet Naba, far away. Musa, far away. Far away. From far away. Prophet Naba, far away. From far away. From far away. Prophet far away. He's the man of wisdom. He's the man who lived by faith. Who lived by faith. His greatest wealth is the richness of his soul. He's the man who lives by faith and not by fear. He's the double-edged sword. He's the double-edged sword. He's the key to unlock the treachery. Follow truth and you shall find him. He's the definition of humanity. He's the beginning and the end. He's the prophet never far away. From far away. Far away. From far away. From far away. Prophet never far away. La Musa far away. From far away. Prophet from far away. Prophet never far away. From far away. From far away. Prophet from far away. Bob Marley say, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Have no fear for atomic energy.